Hi, this is Gabe at fluentforever.com. In these 4 videos, I'm going to show you the bare essentials of phonetics and spelling for Korean. If you're using one of my pronunciation trainers, don't worry about memorizing this stuff. The trainer will do that for you. Just watch and pay attention. Everything you see here will show up sooner or later within the trainer. I'll be going through Korean using the International Phonetic Alphabet, or IPA. This lets us simplify our discussion a lot, since I only need to talk about 29 symbols, many of which you know already, instead of trying to wade through around 150 spelling rules. So, let's get started. We'll break this discussion up into 4 parts. The first we'll talk about Hangul, Korean's alphabet, and Korean's trickiest 12 consonants. The second will cover the rest of Korean's consonants. The third will cover the vowels, and the fourth will cover some of Korean's spelling rules. And just so that we're really accurate with our examples, I have a native speaker here, Judy, who will be helping us out.
Hi.
Before we start, I want to talk for a moment about Korean phonetics, because they are challenging. And if you're not aware of that ahead of time, you can get surprised by it and become frustrated and overwhelmed. And I think the best way to combat that frustration is to set your expectations accurately. So just for a moment, let's talk about what you're up against here. So first, the good news. Korean's alphabet is an absolute breeze to learn. It's probably the easiest to learn alphabet ever invented. Seriously. So that's not going to cause you much trouble at all. And it's honestly one of the reasons I'm starting with this discussion about expectations. You can get so swept away by the ease of the alphabet that you get totally caught off guard when you run into the hard parts. The first really tricky part in learning Korean phonetics is that the sounds of the language are probably going to be new to you, and at first they're going to be pretty difficult to tell apart. The goal of the first 3 videos is to really break those sounds apart, so you can see and hear exactly what's happening in your mouth, which will help you when you try to hear and produce them. In addition to this, you're going to want to do a lot of listening practice. I designed the Korean pronunciation trainer to give you that practice, but no matter what, it's going to take you some time to learn to hear everything, so be prepared for that. The second big challenge in Korean phonetics has to do with its spelling rules. While the alphabet is a breeze to learn at first, there are fairly complex rules telling you when a letter or a letter combination will make one sound or another. We'll go through those rules in depth in the 4th video. To master these, you're going to want to listen to a lot of words and get practice spelling them. I designed the trainer to give you that type of practice as well, but again, these will take some time to get ingrained. So, with that out of the way, let's talk a bit about how Korean's writing system, Hangul, works. It's one of the most elegant alphabets ever created, actually designed for the purposes of being really easy to learn. Basically, you're looking at an alphabet of 35 letters, which seems like a large number until you start to see just how efficiently Hangul depicts its sounds. Take the vowels, for instance.
Here's o, and u. And if you want to form ya, yo, you, you just add a line. Ya, yo, you. Easy.
Consonants get similar treatment.
Here's ga, da, and ja, and ba.
And here's a different version of those 4 consonants with more air coming through them.
Ka, ta, cha, pa. Except for the p sound, again, you're just adding a line to each letter to make new related sounds.
There's even a 3rd version of those same sounds, and again, rather than having to memorize a new letter, you just double up the original symbol.
Ga, da, ja, ba.
The alphabet is full of really clever features like this, and you'll find that learning the letters is going to be one of the easiest, fastest parts of Korean. Now, if you've run into written Korean in the past, you may be a bit confused by now, since the letters I've been showing you are kind of blocky and simple. They're composed of just a few lines, and yet the Korean writing system looks a lot more complex in practice. What's actually going on here is that Korean groups its letters into syllables.
So instead of s, e, you get se. Instead of t, uk, you get tuk. Instead of b, u, ul, you get bur.
If there's a final consonant, it always goes on the bottom. And your first consonant and vowel will either go left to right or top to bottom, depending upon whether the vowel letter is tall, like a, o, I, and e, or if it's wide, like u, o, or u. The only slightly tricky thing is if you start a word with a vowel. In that case, Korean uses a silent placeholder letter, an open circle, to take the place of the consonant that would usually be in that first slot on the left or up top.
So here's E and here's ut.
For the purposes of these videos, I'll be using example words like this, which means you're probably going to be exposed to two new alphabets at once, the Korean alphabet and the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is a bit too much to pay attention to. What I suggest is that you focus on the IPA line. There'll be a lot more overlap with English, and so it'll feel a bit more familiar and it'll help you focus on the sounds, which is the main goal of these first 3 videos. So, with that out of the way, let's get started with the Korean consonants. To really understand how to make most of Korean's consonants, we're going to need to get a crystal clear understanding of 2 concepts, known as voicing and aspiration. So we're going to cover these 2 concepts in a lot of depth. Honestly, more depth than I've done for any other language. So first, let's talk about voicing, because voicing is pretty simple. Most consonants in English come in voiced and unvoiced versions. For instance, B is voiced P, D is voiced T, and Z is voiced S. You can get a feel for this by putting your hand on your throat and saying zzz. You should feel buzzing in your throat. Zzz. And that buzzing, it means that Z is a voiced consonant. If you do that exact same thing, but instead you say s, you'll find that there is no buzzing. S is the unvoiced version of z. Now, S and Z make for easy-to-follow examples of voicing because you can sustain them for a long period of time. S, z. When you move on to consonants like B or D, consonants that only last for an instant, this gets a little more complex and honestly a little more interesting. So place your hand on your throat again and say B. When you do this, a few things happen in a very particular order. First, your lips are going to be closed. Then you start to feel buzzing in your throat and air is going to build up behind your lips. And then your lips will pop open. And you hear your B. The thing that makes a B and the thing that makes a B a voiced consonant is the fact that the buzzing that happens goes on before your lips pop open. B. Now compare that to B's unvoiced partner, P. First, there's no buzz and your lips are closed. It starts exactly the same as a B. Then, air starts building up behind your lips. Then your lips will pop open with a little P sound. P. Then air will start to rush out for a 1/10 of a second, almost making an H sound. P, P. And then, once you've heard that sound, you'll start to feel buzzing in your throat as the vowel E starts. P, P. So, using these same 2 examples, let's talk about aspiration. Let's say both of those letters, but this time, put your hand a couple inches in front of your mouth when you do it. B, P. What you should feel is that there's a big puff of air when you say P. And that puff of air is aspiration. P is an aspirated consonant. And to be really precise, the aspiration happens in that 1/10 of a second between when your lips pop open P, and the vowel E starts. P, P. It's when you're making that H-like sound. And unlike voicing, which only has 2 options, voiced or unvoiced, depending upon whether there's buzzing going on before your lips pop open or not, aspiration can come in different amounts, depending upon how long you wait between when your lips pop open and you start the vowel. If you want it to sound especially strange, you could take a really long time before you started the vowel. P, P. And you'd be making a P sound with more aspiration than the one in English. And if you wanted to sound especially French or Italian, you could start the vowel immediately, as soon as your lips pop open. B, B. In that case, you'd be saying a voiceless P without any aspiration at all. B. We're talking about this in such depth because Korean has 3 Ps, 3 Ts, 3 Ks, and 3 ch sounds, all of which are unvoiced and all of which have different amounts of aspiration when compared with English consonants. Those are the consonants we're going to cover in this video. We'll start with the Ps. The basic P sound in Korean, known as lax P,
is B as in 비행기, B and B.
It's unvoiced, and it's slightly less aspirated than its English counterpart. In IPA, you'll see it marked as a lowercase p.
And if you're comparing it to English, you can compare B and P. You're going to be listening for the amount of aspiration. English has a little bit more B and P. Our next P sound is P, as in 팔, P, or 풀.
It's also unvoiced and has a lot more aspiration than its English counterpart.
So English has P and Korean P.
Last but not least, there's the so-called tense consonant.
B as in 뽀뽀, bin, and 뿔.
This one is totally unaspirated, so you're starting the vowel as soon as your lips pop open.
bin.
But it has one more feature. which is that your throat's going to tense up a bit as you say it, and you're going to pop your lips open faster. As a result, there's going to be more energy in the consonant, and so once your lips pop open, the vowel will be higher pitched.
So it's not just B, it's B.
And if you want to compare this consonant to the English P sound,
you can use Bini and Pini.
So, if we're comparing all three Korean P's to each other,
there's 불, 풀, and 뿔.
Next, let's talk about the T sounds in Korean. The basic T sound in Korean, known as lax T again,
is D as in 당근, 댁, and 달.
In IPA, you'll see it marked as a lowercase t. And just as P was, it's unvoiced and slightly less aspirated than its English counterpart. It's also made in a slightly different spot in your mouth. In English, T's are made with the tip of your tongue pulled away, back from your upper teeth, onto your alveolar ridge. T, t, t. But in Korean, the tongue is a bit further forward. You're basically almost touching your front teeth with the tip of your tongue.
If you're comparing it to English, you can compare 댁 and 택. You're going to be listening for the amount of aspiration. English has a little bit more. 댁 and 택. Our next T sound is T, as in 토끼띠, 탈.
Predictably, it's also unvoiced and has a lot more aspiration than its English counterpart.
English has T, Korean T.
Last but not least, there is tense T.
뜨 as in 딸기, 댁, 딸.
It's totally unaspirated, and again, the tension in your throat will make the vowel afterwards be a bit higher pitched.
So it's not just 댁, it's 댁. If you'd like to compare this consonant to English T sound, you can use 댁 and 택. So comparing all three Korean T's to each other, we have 달, 탈, 딸.
Our second to last set of sounds are the K sounds of Korean. First, we have lax K.
그 as in 고기, 기. If you're comparing to English, you can use 기 and 키.
Our next K sound is the aspirated
크 as in cup, 키. If we're comparing to English, English has 키 and Korean 키.
Then comes tense K.
끄 as in 꼬마, 끼. If you're comparing this consonant to the English K sound, you can use 끼 and 키.
And if we're comparing all three Korean Ks to each other,
there's 기, 키, 끼.
The last sounds we'll cover in this video are the ch sounds of Korean. There are three of them, a lax one, an aspirated one, and a tense one, just like the other consonants in this video. But now we're kind of in new territory, since there's no real equivalent to ch in English. So let's spend a second talking about what to do with your mouth to make this sound, before we jump into the three versions of it.
Ch sounds a lot like ch in English.
English's ch sound is made of a T sound and a sh sound, which combine and both involve your tongue touching your alveolar ridge, like this, ch. Where Korean's ch sound is made with the tongue a bit further forward, and the middle of the tongue further up, like this, ch. You're nearly touching the roof of your mouth. And like all the consonants in this video, we have three versions. First, we have the lax version.
ch as in 자다, 지. If you're comparing to English's ch sound, you can compare 지 and 치.
Our next ch sound is the aspirated version.
ch as in 차다, 치. If you're comparing to English's ch, English has 치 and Korean 치.
And then comes the tense version.
쯔 as in 짜다, 지. If you're comparing this consonant to the English ch sound, you can use 지 and 치. And if you're comparing all three Korean ch sounds to each other, there's 자다, 차다, and 짜다.
And that's it for the trickiest of Korean's consonants. In the next video, we'll cover the rest of them. To quickly review, we talked about voicing and aspiration in this video, and how they're both really all about when your vocal cords start vibrating. That can happen before you open your mouth for a voiced consonant, like B, to right when you open your mouth for an unaspirated, unvoiced consonant, B, to long after you open your mouth for a really aspirated, unvoiced consonant, P. And then we jumped into 12 of the trickiest consonants of Korean. The three P sounds,
lax B as in 비행기,
which is very slightly aspirated,
aspirated P as in 팔,
which is much more aspirated,
and tense B as in 뽀뽀,
which is unvoiced, unaspirated, and comes out with a lot of lip and throat tension, which usually makes the vowel afterwards higher pitched.
뽀뽀.
And then we had three T sounds.
lax D as in 당근, aspirated T as in 토끼, and tense D as in 딸기.
Then came the Ks.
lax G as in 고기, aspirated K as in cup, and tense G K as in goma.
And finally, the three ch sounds, which are made in a similar way to ch in English, except your tongue is much closer to the roof of your mouth.
There was lax version j as in chada, the aspirated version ch as in chada, and the tense version j as in chada.
And that is all for this video. Next stop, we'll cover the remaining consonants.